Uh, this is the developer panel, and I think we've got our live streaming glitches out of the way this morning. So I'm really happy to welcome these three developers. I wanted y'all to come on because you each have apps that work with Micro.blog, but they're very different apps, and they have different perspectives. And so I think it would be neat to talk about it, and we'll just kind of go through. If you want to start, maybe I'll start with Daniel, and then Vincent and Sam go through just a little introduction. What's your background, what's your app, and how have you come to join us today?
I have an in with the founder of Micro.blog, in that we've been doing a tech podcast together for 13 years. And it's kind of funny. I have been working on a blog editing app for the Mac for those 13 years. And it's kind of funny that Manton ended up doing a blog publishing service. And who was I as the developer of MarsEdit? I don't think I mentioned that. MarsEdit, the blog editor for the Mac. Who was I as the developer of a blog editor not to support one of my best friend's blogging services? So he offered me like $200,000 or $300,000, I think. No. And that's what he offered you guys too, right? Same thing, same deal.
You would have added support much earlier if I had done that, probably.
Yeah, I would have. It's true. I was a little slow, all things considered. Actually, what was great is Manton decided with Micro.blog to support a couple APIs. So I think it was a very pragmatic decision that he decided. One of the APIs he decided to support was an API that is older than Dirt, the Meta Weblog API. Very classic API derived from the original Blogger API way back when before Blogger was owned by Google. Very basic XML RPC based API. And the great news is, though, because MarsEdit supports this API, technically speaking, for me to support Micro.blog took nothing. It was just Manton making an endpoint on Micro.blog that could support that API. And then, years passed, and then I finally gave in and started adding a little, we have some little finesses to the support in MarsEdit now, where I think we added it so that it can download all of your posts, does paging and stuff. These are things that are not built into Meta Weblog, but which we were able to sort of tack on pragmatically, just to sort of leverage the existing support. So that's my story as it regards Micro.blog. Basically, I'm along for the ride with Manton. I've been, as his podcast co-host, I've been aware of Micro.blog for a very long time, and just glad to be able to support it in whatever way I can.
Thank you. Vincent, what about you? What's your app?
Yeah, so I'm Vincent. I make Gluon, and I'm kind of come from web development originally. I came to development a bit later than in life than I wanted, but now I'm here. I always kind of was interested in creating apps, and then just over the years, I started dabbling into that. With Micro.blog, I started to know about it after I got the gold bar from Manton, obviously. And I was listening to CoreInt a lot. I mean, I was listening to CoreInt before I could code, basically. And that's kind of how I learned about it as well. I didn't join the Kickstarter at the time because I couldn't afford it. But I did sign up then when it publicly launched. So that was kind of really, nice. And it was a big change from other social networks, which I won't mention by name. And, it's just something, the community over at Micro.blog was just fantastic, very supportive. And, early on, it was really very basic, and it continues to be like this now. And I really like that about Micro.blog. It just stays on mission. It doesn't try to woo anyone in, features and likes and all this stuff, hashtags. So yeah, that kind of got me interested in Micro.blog as well, with Gluon, which is the app I make, cross-platform app for both iOS and Android. and hopefully some others given time. I created that after a client project because I want to learn a bit more about the framework I was using, and there were a few Micro.blog apps on the go. There were a few other people doing apps as well. There was one fellow, he was doing it for some university challenge, I think. I can't remember his name. Maybe it was Chris. It was a long time ago. So I kind of saw that happening and I thought, it would be actually quite nice to try this as well. And, it's a great community and I thought that's my way to contribute towards it.
Excellent. Sam, what about you?
Hi, I'm Sam Grover. So I've been making iOS apps for a while, since about 2009. And every once in a while, I start to think about making a side project or something. And I think Micro.blog came to my attention some years ago. I don't recall exactly how it happened, maybe through Gene. But yeah, and my blog has, over the last 15 years has moved from platform to platform because things change and, you don't like a platform and you move on and you find something else you like. So that's how I ended up on Micro.blog at some point. And once I was there and I was liking it, I was started seeing how I was using it. And what I do is on my blog, I post photos and sometimes groups of photos. So I started exploring the API and that's how my app Mimi Uploader came to be. So yeah, I first explored I think I wrote a prototype, chatted with Manton a bit, got some knowledge on the API, and yeah, Mimi Uploader basically lets you upload photos to your Micro.blog hosted site. And I think it really shines when you're uploading a bunch of photos for a post, because you select the photos, it preserves the order, and you get a text blob out of it, like Markdown and HTML, which you then take to your post editor of choice, like on the website or Mars Edit or whatever. So that's the app, and I think I launched it 1.5 years ago, and I've been slowly adding features here and there as I felt necessary. So yeah,
that's great. Yeah, I really like the idea of there being lots of different apps, and they all have their own kind of take on their user interface, their approach, and something that's just for photos. I think is great. Like you said, like the batch uploading that you do in your app is just, it's better than most apps that don't really think about that.
I think so.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like an app that's designed for mostly just uploading one photo or maybe a couple photos, but that isn't completely designed around that idea of batch uploading. I mean, you can spend much more time fine tuning the UI. And so it really shows. It's really nice. And I'm wondering kind of how I was thinking about all the different apps here, and Daniel, I mean, his app is very general purpose. Mars Edit can do all sorts of different blog features, works with different apps. But Daniel, you've also experimented in the past of more focused, blogging apps maybe that would just do one. You never ship them, but things that would only post photos or only tweet or whatever. And I don't know. I'm just wondering if y'all have any thoughts on just the role of those different types of apps, and can a platform like Micro.blog support lots of different apps, or do people naturally just kind of default to using one?
I mean, for what I see, when they see Micro.blog, they kind of think an alternative to Twitter. And, you see the ecosystem of Twitter apps, and they're feature rich and they support the whole platform in general. So I kind of get the feeling, that's what in general people want. They want a app that works with the whole platform as best as possible. But I think, having little niche apps or niche, I don't know how you say it in American, niche in European English.
Nobody knows. Nobody's figured it out yet.
I say it a different way every time.
Yeah. But, niche apps like Sam's Mimi uploader, I mean, it's got a beautiful UI. I really love it. I mean, I look at it and I look at Glue and I'm like, oh, it makes me jealous, but this is good. I like it. And it's very, specific to a specific task, just like Micro.blog itself has a app for blogging. And you also have Sunlit, which is very specific just for photos, and you kind of don't try to jam that into one app as such, which is nice. I can see more apps cropping up like that. In general, just focusing on different areas. Some people like a great editor, so they might go to Mars Edit. I mean, you wouldn't want to use Gluon for anything big, for example, or uploading multiple images. But for simple things, just replying or blogging a little bit, nothing too complex, you can have this general app as such. But I think, having something more niche, I think, is quite good. Yeah.
Yeah. And from my point of view, I mean, I lean towards making niche apps for my own projects, not like work, but and that's kind of what got me excited when I come across a new platform, even like Micro.blog, when I did a few years ago. I was like, oh, I could do this and it'll work really well for me, and maybe other people will use it too.
Yeah, I was thinking as we're talking about different apps, some of the thing we don't talk about very often is our app Wavelength, which is just for podcasts. It's like even more niche than a lot of other apps, and it's never going to have as many users probably as something that can do photos or post text. But I love the idea of experimenting with that kind of stuff in an app that's very focused. And I'd love to do more with that app. We open sourced it if anybody wants to tinker with it, or
The great thing with Micro.blog is it's kind of geared towards different people. It's just not hashtag this, hashtag that, hashtag this, like reacting, like some other social network. So you have these, I mean, I wouldn't call them groups of people, but you have specific needs for everyone. I just want to blog. I want to write long form posts. You might want to use Mars Edit for that. IA Writer, that's another third party. Drafts, these are writing apps. They're very specific for that. For me personally, I could never code something like this. I would not, for me, I don't have this workflow myself. So for me, I kind of find it hard to do something like that. But, like Wavelength, Sunlit, again, those just target those specific ones, which is, nice, and would be good to see more of that.
Always thought since Manton started with Micro.blog, and then as he expanded into things like Wavelength and incorporating adapting Sunlit to Micro.blog, it kind of has a little bit of the taste of infinite possibilities that app.net used to have. And I know that was a big inspiration to Manton in some ways. I think Micro.blog probably he had the idea before app.net even existed, but I think there was something a little bit too about app.net. It kind of just they sort of positioned it like an everything network that happens to have a Twitter clone on top of it. And I think it was a better approach in Manton's case to really just he has never been emphasizing it as anything but a blogging platform. And then it's more about shining a light on the different ways you can blog. But I do think every time he or anybody else comes out with a sort of surprisingly tailor-made app for a specific type of blogging, that is a way to differentiate from other platforms that don't have an open API. You're never going to find, I mean, let's just pick, I know everyone else has been tactfully not naming other social networks, but just to pick one that is horrible with respect to APIs, Instagram, right? They don't even support an API. So anybody who wants to leverage the massive customer base of Instagram to provide a novel new type of app would be out of luck. And a platform like Micro.blog is a place that they can try whatever they want to, pretty much. If it fits within the social standards of Micro.blog, then it's appropriate to build an app for that purpose.
Yeah, it's just a reminder that some of these big platforms aren't actually platforms in the developer sense anymore. Facebook has scaled back all their stuff quite a bit because we don't need to get into the details, but they open kind of a can of worms that they maybe regret. And but it's a bummer for developers. But you're totally right about app.net, Daniel, that I remember writing a blog post about this because I was so excited from a developer perspective. I think I called it like an amplifier for web apps or something like that, where it's like you could just take any idea and like give it a boost because they have this platform. But that's really something that developers get excited about, not end users, regular people. It's like app.net had some cool apps that used the data, the data store and annotations and chat. Like there was an app that was just for chat. That's cool, but it makes a very difficult to describe like story.
It's like telling the world, have you heard about the electric grid? Brings electricity to your house. And then people are like, okay, but what are we going to do with it? And it took somebody coming along and say like, have you heard of lamps? They lighten up your room at night, And it's like, that's the difference is app.net was very much the electric grid. And they only really ever had one big example of what you could do with it, but it was basically blogging. So maybe they should have pushed that more.
Yeah, that's what I like about Micro.blog. It's it's in the name, it's blogging first, and then you've added the photos in there as well to take on, let's say, Instagram and podcasting, so, and then you just happen to have a social network around it. And that's what I like about it. And, that's why I kind of created Gluon in the first place, because you had the social aspect to it. And I wanted to do a little quick app that I could just reply to people, without much fuss. That's got me into that. I wasn't really into blogging. I mean, like long form blogging. I just was more interested in like the little short thing or replying to people. Yeah. And it's good, you're like on mission, you have these three things. I know you've expanding with bookshelves and other things as well. So yeah.
Bookshelves is still a bit of an experiment. Like I don't know how that fits into everything we've just said yet. Like it's the first feature probably in Micro.blog that really exists almost outside the API. Like there is an API for it, but it's more designed to get people to put stuff in that then will turn into a blog post. It's like a pre-draft kind of way to organize data, which I think is really interesting. And I personally love it, but it is a little bit new. It's not like a core blogging feature. It's something that sits kind of like on top of it.
I have a few requests to integrate that.
Okay. Yeah. I think I did maybe the bare minimum on the API with that. So there's maybe some things missing when people actually build. Well, and but that's actually a great example of a niche kind of app. Like there's a lot of people now building like Goodreads alternatives. And I would love to see some really nice indie apps that are all about tracking what you're reading. And they could be expanded to, movies and, music and other things too. But it's kind of until people start building that stuff on Micro.blog, I'm not totally sure what API changes we need to make. Speaking, good.
I was just going to say, Vincent, did you mention already that Vincent works for you?
No.
So when he says, I have a few requests, he might be putting work on his plate.
Yeah. I've got a full notebook here.
Yeah.
I'm making notes.
We all work for Manton in our own special ways.
Thanks for pointing that out. I mentioned it in the intro session this morning, but a lot of people probably missed that. But when we planned this session, he was not doing any work for us. I'm pretty sure. I think it's an
inside job. Yeah.
I couldn't
agent
boot him from the panel. That actually brings, I don't want to kind of derail this, but that also brings up some interesting points about just the relationship between the developer community and us. And I'm all about supporting third-party developers just because I feel like I just still remember being burned by Twitter and how their feeling toward developers was. So I never want that to happen. But it is a little bit, there's unique questions about Vincent doing work on the back end and also doing his own app. I wanted to circle, good.
I mean, we're careful with that, I don't want to, as I said, I don't plan on, developing anything on Micro.blog and then using that first in Glue. For me, that I always said I won't do that. It'll have to be at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I think the best way to think about it is like before you started doing work on the Micro.blog backend, there were things in the API that annoyed you or feature requests, and like if you help work on those, that will help everybody. It's not something specific to Glue on. That'll help all apps.
Yeah, that's the plan.
And I just want to add to that like when I started working on Mimi Implorer and exploring the APIs, like it was really helpful that I would post questions and it would just be add help or whatever, and you would respond. That was really useful. I recall like even Jonathan Hayes, Cheesemaker, was also like, hey, we have the snippets library. I think that was open source at some point. And he was like, you can use that for some of those things you're doing. And I was like, well, I don't really need all of that. I just need a little tiny bit because I'm making a niche app. So for that, I rolled on my own, but it was really helpful that I was able, everybody was responsive and give me details. Like, I think I bugged you a whole bunch about media uploading and photos and like what sizes you support and profiles and things like that. And it was all useful and helpful in developing the app.
Oh, that's great to hear. And
Manton's really good with getting back to you all the time. I also booked him about image uploading. It's always so difficult. Like, why is the image uploading always so difficult?
Oh, I remember we're going back and forth on that.
Manton is he's like Larry David over there.
Yeah. Really? Are you sure?
He's saying for all the people who are watching who maybe haven't had a response to their email yet, right?
Daniel and I were just talking about that on our podcast about, sometimes I'm really fast to reply to email and sometimes they get lost. I don't want to talk about that. I'm glad you mentioned snippets and John Hayes though, because I was talking to him about this panel and he had a couple questions that he wanted me to throw out to y'all. And one of them was, why don't any of you use the snippets framework? So this is our Swift based iOS, Mac, tvOS, whatever framework that it's kind of like a mix of the Micro.blog specific APIs and also Micropub, IndieWeb APIs. So you could post to other servers potentially. And it has XML RPC in there also for posting to WordPress.
Go first?
So yeah, go for it.
It's in Swift.
Okay, yeah. So your app is written in React Native.
React Native. So it's JavaScript. You've got a sprinkle of native on top. React Native kind of makes a native app as such, but the logic is written in JavaScript. So this kind of gives me the freedom of creating for Android and iOS, iPad, and then hopefully Mac as well. So, and I only have one code base as such. So that's kind of why. Yeah, I'd love to use it.
For me, like I mentioned, like I needed like a little bit of what I think snippets are providing, and it didn't make sense to me to integrate the whole thing. But like, I think like it would be really useful for another app that I use, iCrow. I don't know the name of the developer, but I think Manton. That looks like it might be a native app. And I wonder if they're using snippets.
That's an interesting point about just learning from it, because I think one of the goals with that library, is to eventually share code between the official Micro.blog apps. And, full disclosure, the Micro.blog official app doesn't use snippets yet either, just because something's going to break when we rip out that code and add Sunlit does use it fully. But yeah, it would be neat to take that code, and even if you don't want to use the code itself, like have it like heavily documented and be a good example because our documentation, could always be better, and especially some of the IndieWeb APIs, like being able to.
That was for me. The snippets helped me with. I had a look at it when I was developing, but for me it was the IndieWeb kind of component of it, because IndieWeb is, for me, it doesn't, it didn't make sense to me at the time. Really, I was like, I didn't get the concepts at the beginning. So for looking at snippets, it was good just to kind of figure out, okay, how is it calling this? But why is it always calling the same thing? But then you just add different parameters and get what you need. So that's kind of really helpful, to have something and to see all the different API calls going to the Micro.blog API.
Cool, that's good.
Yeah.
So I guess you should answer too, Daniel. Why don't you? You have your own. You have your own code.
No, it's actually, it is instructive just from like, for anybody who's interested in the idea of, since this is an API client development show, I've been asked about this kind of question over the years many times, because almost every blog system out there has like a library that they want to provide to, systems that do have an API often provide a ready-made library. You drop in and you use it. And you can just understand how if you support like 5 or 6 different blogging systems, it doesn't make as much sense to have 5 or 6 different drop-in libraries when there's a huge overlap with all the stuff they do. So like you said, Manton, this includes support for XML RPC. I've got my own XML RPC, down to little things like in my app, Mars Edit, any network request you make goes through a system where you can bring up a window to view the log of the network activity. And so that requires my own custom networking layer that kind of has like, call outs that help facilitate logging. So you can get the idea pretty quickly. For it, I think that kind of library is very useful for a drop-in solution for an app that's going to be tailor-made for one platform. So something that's going to be drop-in, and maybe in this case, drop-in for anything micro.pub. And maybe I'll look at this code when I implement micro.pub support, not to integrate it as is, but maybe just as an example of the kinds of things I need to work with. But it's funny, Vincent said, oh, because it's in Swift, these days I'm leaning towards Swift for everything, for my stuff. So it would be no problem at all that it's in Swift, and I might even be able to grab a few source files and just take them, integrate them into my own stuff as is. But in general, I'm usually trying to pull back and say, like, how can I solve this in a way that will fix or provide a feature for Micro.blog or for WordPress or whatever, and also lay the framework for supporting that same feature in other things. Like this came up with Manton when I added support for, I think, well, at least the paging thing where you can download all the posts in your history. And I was like, Manton, this is how it works on these other systems. What can you do? And he was able to add paging support. But those are the kinds of things where if I had a different drop-in library for each system, I'd have to go then make sure that works in every system independently.
Yeah. So while we're getting through John's questions, I feel bad about asking this one, but he told me to ask, where's the iOS version of Mars Edit? Sorry.
Come on, John, you got it better. You got it better. You should make that you can waste that question on core intuition, right?
Well, so I mean, I know we've talked about this a lot, so I know the answer, but I want to lead it into, I was wondering if Sam, if you've thought about other platforms for maybe, I mean, I know it's very like designed for iOS, but have you thought about bringing it to like a desktop version?
I actually tried to compile it when it first became available and ran into a couple of issues, and I haven't looked into it since then. Okay. It wasn't at the top of my list to port it to the Mac. I would like it because there are times when I was I want to do something, and then I'm putting it into my iCloud library and going to my phone and using it over there. Yep. So I would rather avoid that trip.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for something like that, because if you think about Instagram, like people ask for Instagram Mac apps all the time, right? And I don't even think Instagram has an iPad app. Do they still?
No.
Yeah, so
they don't, and they're third-party hacks that make Mac apps. Yeah,
right. And that stuff maybe will continue to work, or maybe they'll shut it down. But yeah, it feels like if we had some great Mac-based tools that are all around photos, I don't know. I think I would totally use that. I think that would be nice.
Yeah, for example, Darkroom, the app for photos and for photo editing, they recently released on the Mac, and their app it was gorgeous on the phone. It worked really well, and they made it to iPad. It worked really well. It works really good on the Mac too.
Awesome.
Well, Sam, if you decide to dig into that again, I know there's lots of venues on the internet for coding problems, but just to keep it kind of in the community here, Manton and I on our Slack channel for Core Intuition, we have a code channel in there, and it's a very welcoming place for anybody who has anything they want to discuss. And I think especially Micro.blog related things would be very welcome. And you'd find a lot of people in there who have more familiarity with it than in a more general purpose development group.
Cool. Yeah. If I recall, like when I tried to do that, like I used like 3 or 4 third-party libraries, and like one of them was like breaking something. So it's like one of those things where I don't know if I want to deal with that right now. You know, it's kind of
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. To Mac.
Yep.
Swift UI or Electron.
Oh. Electron.
Just joking.
Yeah, Electron. For people watching this later,
in the
it's a
future,
big,
yeah.
in the future, it's a big deal.
Or
this
the
week.
past.
Yeah,
That would be impressive.
1Password's new version is Electron in beta, and I found that discussion really fascinating, actually, because a lot of that company has a lot of old, longtime Mac developers that have been doing Mac stuff forever, and Apple has a very kind of fragmented framework strategy at the moment in some ways. Or that's how I feel. And so the fact that they chose that, I think, is really interesting. But it does. I mean, I'm glad we have Vincent here to represent the Android side, but that is something that is certainly on our mind a lot, because new people join Micro.blog all the time, and they use a PC, and they use Android, and they use Linux, and obviously we have the web version. This isn't something that's just tied to mobile platforms, but there's nothing really. The web version has some quirks anyway, and even if it was perfect, it wouldn't replace the need for nice native apps. So I don't know. Have you all thought? I don't know. I guess just something we think about. I guess
I think if you have the opportunity to support other platforms, because the Apple universe is not the only one.
Yeah,
that's how I think about it. Just do it. I mean, if you have to learn a new programming language that's completely out of your comfort zone, then don't do it. And if it takes a lot of your time, don't do it. But if you want to learn, do it. I'm doing JavaScript because I knew it. I knew the React Native framework, and I wanted to try it. And there was only one app for Android for Micro.blog, Dialogue. So I think it's still in the store. And that was kind of a really good, well-designed native app, but there hasn't been anything since that I know about. But yeah, just there's lots of Android phones around as well. There's a whole community there as well.
Yeah, I have an Android phone now, and I always tell myself that I will get more into it, and I really should live with that platform for a couple weeks, and I think that there's nothing like using it to kind of live in the customer's shoes a little bit more.
I mean, personally, I've been a bit reluctant to move to because I've been blogging about it, moving to Swift UI for Gluon for the Apple platforms, because I think there will be this native performance boost. But then again, it's a lot of learning I have to do, and it takes away time from other development on the other side of the platform universe, the Android universe. So I'm kind of trying to weigh up the options. What should I concentrate on? Should I do it for more general purpose? Just live with React Native for the future, and just do my best there. Because I mean, every year they bring out new phones, and JavaScript performance is so much better, with each new processor they bring out. So initially, when I first created, for me, that was I kind of worried about it performance-wise. There are some performance penalties. Accessibility isn't as great as it should be. So, I have to weigh all that up. But, if you on the side know JavaScript and another framework, give it a go. The more third-party apps there are, the better.
I think if there were a cross-platform library like Electron that provided an A+, everybody agrees, platform superior experience on all the platforms that it supported, I would use it even if it took 250 megabytes as a baseline for my simple app. I think there's very much something to be said and to be empathetic with people about the promise of a cross-platform library. Now, I've never supported anything with my apps in my entire adult career. I've only ever supported the Mac and now a little bit iOS. So I've always been in Apple's camp. But it's funny, the folks who listen to the podcast Core Intuition with Manton and I know that our loyalty can be tested, and so it's like it is very interesting, the idea of portable cross-platform frameworks, and I think we're getting closer and closer to the promise of that, to the point that where I think if you asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't really think it was possible that we would see something that would meet that like standard, like I was saying, like something that actually feels like top of its class on each platform that it serves. And I don't think we're there yet.
No.
But I can't fault people for making that choice. It's their choice to make. I'm disappointed too when I see something that I love like turn to what I think is an inferior UI or has a worse user experience. But they're not just doing it because they're not dumb, they're not just doing it because they don't know better. They're making an informed trade-off. And especially in a company like 1Password, as Manton said, they have so many Mac and iOS, it's a Mac rooted company. The company was founded by Mac people. It was like every other platform they support was an afterthought. So for them to make this decision, I don't know if it's the right decision, and I would tend to lean towards it not being a great decision, but they must have their reasons. And I empathize with that. And I just wish that the cross-platform solutions were better, and I think they will get better. But, if I could snap my fingers right now and have, let's say Swift UI became like the platform that adapted itself best to all the different platforms. I'd love that. I'd love it if I could say no more work and I'm just going to give you a great Windows app that, I just have to do a little testing on it and voila, here you go. But we're not there yet.
As well. Yeah. No,
So
I would
there's
love Swift UI. Swift UI is really great. It's got lots of promise.
Yeah.
And we just need this fruit company to recognize there's other things out there as well.
Yeah.
Or
Right,
someone to take Swift UI and make it.
I don't know if Apple has any incentive to acknowledge the existence of other platforms. And I don't know if anybody else has much incentive to gratify Apple by embracing their technology. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, even if Swift UI is really good, like somebody out there in the world, like Microsoft or Linux aficionados, they'd probably rather just take those ideas from Swift UI and make something else. Really, if it's you don't want to bring the baggage of Apple having like their giant, they're going to have a lot of control over whatever platforms they're involved in. So I don't know. We're going off topic.
Yeah, we're going. I have
Sorry.
a story. But
You invited me on the show, Manton. It's your fault.
no, that's good.
A funny story about mentioning Apple. They actually rejected Gluon because I had the Google Play button on my website.
Funny.
Wow.
Yeah, whenever you let Apple go on your website and poke around, you're asking for trouble. There's a link to buy something. Oh, forget it.
Yeah, I had to code a special query string. So if you went on the website through the app, it hides all the Android.
That's actually really interesting. I wonder if that is actually against rules. That was a new one. I don't think I've heard that.
I don't think it should be, because it's all about like their complaint isn't what you have on your website in general, but what you lead, I think, their users to.
Especially if it's within your app. If you open an in-app browser, that's the issue. If you go into Safari outside, that's fine. But if it's in the app, they have that problem.
That's fine in quotes, as long as it doesn't say, by the way, did you know you can pay me $50 via PayPal?
Donate now.
So we need to wrap up in a minute, but just to like pull this back to Micro.blog as we close out, is there anything that anything new you want to work on, or anything that y'all would enjoy seeing on the Micro.blog side to support third-party developers and like different kinds of apps, different kinds of features. If you could snap your fingers.
Well,
Micro.blog,
I need to check in with where we stand with this, but one of the things I'm working on in Mars Edit is a big update to support managing your media files independently of blog posts. And so I think I've chatted with you a little bit about this, Manton. And I don't know where it stands right now in the API, but at some point soon, I would like to be able to manipulate all of the uploaded media to Micro.blog independently of the posts they happen to be inserted in. And that would be a nice feature to be able to allow bloggers to reuse their existing media in multiple posts, or just to sort of have the media be part of the assets that are all downloaded when you sync. One of the things people like about Mars Edit in recent years is its ability to, like I said, download all the posts. So right now it downloads all the posts, but it doesn't download all the media. And that'll be something I'm working on it for WordPress, but it's going to be something I want to do with Micro.blog as soon as possible.
Yeah, I found that difficult because you have to rely on the indie web kind of way of getting media. And for me, I like to see something a bit more modern on top of that. So you hide this complexity, this layer of complexity that you then have to relearn yourself basically to get everything from the indie web side of things. But, if you can just say, user/photos get whatever, and I'll just bring down the photos. And behind the scenes, we can use the indie web protocols, but you would have this modern API on top of it. I think that would be quite nice. That's kind of when I was working on Blue, and I wish it had that. Because, indie web's not too hard, but it can be for someone that's new, starting, someone that's learning the new ways, like right now. They use the modern APIs, and then they look at indie web and like, okay, this is completely different than what I know.
It's funny the way you use the word modern there, because some of those indie web APIs are like new. They're I guess they don't fit the way you were thinking about them, but like the media,
new original stock.
They're Micro.blog can definitely, you can get the list of uploaded files and all that sort of thing. But it would be good to do more. Yeah, I agree. And it's nice, kind of like what Sam was saying a minute ago of like, he's on, his Mac and he moves a photo somewhere so that he can go on, iOS, and like being able to jump between apps. I think it would be really useful, where like maybe one app is great at uploading photos or managing photos or renaming, whatever. But another app can take it from there to like do the final publish step. So yeah, everything is there, but I hear what you're saying about making it better, basically.
Not a job for me.
Yeah, that's right. Got to get yourself some more work.
Damn it.
Sam, is there anything you'd like to see, or any different direction or anything?
Well, I think you kind of mentioned to me this uploads API that has a list of uploads, because I recently had this feature called recent uploads, which was basically like local to the app. Like, hey, this is what you just uploaded. You want to look at it again or whatever. And I did have a couple of thoughts on like what I could do with that, but I haven't yet tried it out. So I don't have any feedback right now. But like, yeah, I'm kind of thinking on those terms in terms of what I want to do next with it. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for being here, and really appreciate y'all talking about all this. And it always gives me, I don't know, every time we talk about this stuff, it kind of inspires me to go off and make the API better, or document something, or
So the second half of Micro Camp is canceled because Manton needs to get back to work.
It's a live coding session.
If I may, I just also want to thank like the community, because like when making a niche apps, you really want people who kind of have that same interest and who would want to use that. And it was really useful and helpful for me that I shared that, and people used it and used the beta and gave me feedback. And I was able to utilize, and the bugs, whenever people would point out, I would try to get those addressed as soon as possible. But yeah, I still have a long list of features and those get added to a list, and I address them when I can. But yeah, it's really nice when the community is engaged with providing that kind of feedback.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask like what kind of feedback y'all have you'll have had. And that's great to hear. Yeah.
No, it's good. It's it was very welcoming. You know, it's always very welcoming if you're trying something, you know, something new, asking for feedback. They'll reply to you and help you out, and you know that kind of helps you create the app. You know, long term you kind of see to their needs, and then you see where you end up.
Also, I guess there was a talk earlier today about learning about what you blog, and like I was thinking about that. I was listening to that. I was thinking about how when I was building this app and I was like trying to build new features, and I shared that on Micro.blog and got feedback right away. It was like that learning process, and it was something that I know other developers have done, and you know, on Twitter or whatever they post about it, but I'd never done that before. So that also was like, it was kind of cool to see that that's you know. I kind of did that, and it was like useful, and the community was there for that too.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for listening. And we'll talk to you next time.
See you later.
Pleasure.